welcome to GameBabble. I'm your host, Jell. With all three companies putting out their motion controllers, it's clear that motion control is a big thing. However, our opinions and facts about motion control have gotten muddled over its bizarre lifespan. So let's roll it back to the beginning and ask the most important question of all. What the fuck is the point? No, seriously. Why am I waving my arms around rather than just pressing a button? Now, if you were to ask anyone else, they would tell you immersion, because that was Nintendo's excuse. However, that's not exactly true. Let's think about it for a second. Have you ever played a game that you've gotten really involved in? And you know, this controller sort of becomes an extension of your body, and, you can lose yourself in the game. Forgetting about your physical body and just engrossing yourself. It's kind of hard to get much more immersive than that now, isn't it? On the other hand, with motion control, you're actually swinging the controller around. Not only do you notice any differences between your own motions and the character on screen's motions, but more importantly, your arm is getting tired, and you're made acutely aware of your physical bodies and your own personal limitations. Not to mention, like really good motion control, you're going to be punching and swinging around, and you're going to be sweating up a storm, and sweat gets in your eyes, and yeah, if anything, it's actually less immersive than regular controls. But really, immersion's kinda overrated. No, really, think about it. Like, any competitive game, could you really call it immersive? What with 13-year-olds throwing around a colorful variety of racial slurs in your ears, or guys screaming about mango-flavored mecha? Kinda pulls you out of the game a little bit. So, immersion's not really all that important. So, let's ask this question again. Why am I swinging a controller around or flailing my arms around rather than just pressing a button? Well, let's think about it. This is motion control. That would be a type of control. And how do you make control better? Well, logically, it would be to have more control. But Jell, you say, motion control is just replacing button presses with controller waggles. That's not adding more control. And you're half right. If all you're doing is replacing button presses with controller waggles or various gestures, then your motion control is completely and utterly pointless. It offers no more control than a standard controller, and in many cases may offer less control. Think about it. All three controllers have games that do this, and even the best, most accurate controller can get its gestures confused. The more gestures you have, the more easily it gets confused, and as such, it actually offers less control. And obviously, that's less control too. So that's not really what I'd consider good motion control. So what is? How does good motion control offer you more control? All three controllers provide some level of control that a standard controller doesn't have. The best example comes from the PlayStation Move, specifically Sports Champions. Let's look at table tennis. The Move is capable of tracking its position in space relative to the TV, along with its orientation, and this in turn controls the paddle on screen, allowing you to move it forwards and backwards, tilted at any angle. You have complete control over the paddle's position and angle and velocity, and that actually does affect the on-screen action. The ball runs off a physics engine, and when it connects with the paddle, the angle of the paddle, where on the paddle the ball connects with, the velocity of the paddle, and how the paddle moves as it connects with the ball, along with, the ball's flight path and where in that you hit it and all affect how the ball moves, and you have complete control over this. If you want to, you could smack the ball straight down into the table. You could flick it up into the air. You could hold the paddle upside down if you so desired. And all of these things alter how the ball moves, giving you more control, more depth, more strategy. But this raises a far more important question. Does more control equal more fun? Well, no, and not because it's too complex or too much work, but because it's a controller, and controllers are not inherently fun. If they were, then Rock of the Dead wouldn't have been a complete pile of shit. No, it's the games that are fun, and as such, if there are no good games, it doesn't matter how good your motion controller is. So, doesn't that render motion control pointless? Not at all, because you see, with more control comes more gameplay possibilities. Motion control can potentially offer so much control, it can birth entirely new genres and reinvent existing ones. Think about the table tennis example I just gave. That's way different than any other version of table tennis you've ever played. It's completely reinvented digital table tennis. On the other hand, let's look at the gladiator duel game in Sports Champions. You have complete control over the sword, and how you swing, how well you swing, actually affects how much damage you deal. What's more, you're not just blocking high or low, you actually position the shield yourself, having complete control over it. This completely changes how the game plays. It's much less about crazy combos and more about defense, finding holes in your opponent's defense and exploiting them while also keeping yourself guarded. The end result is practically an entirely new subgenre of fighters. And with these new genres and subgenres and so on, come new possibilities for more fun. However, motion control must never, ever replace standard control. Period. Why? Well, just because Gladiator Duel is a whole new way to play fighters doesn't instantly make Soul Calibur obsolete or not fun anymore. No, it's a different kind of game. And there's just certain things that wouldn't feel right with motion control. Here's one that appeals to both hardcore and casuals. Pac-Man and Tetris. Good lord, if you knew how many times people just walk into a game store and ask for Pac-Man and Tetris. Seriously though, could you imagine Pac-Man and Tetris on motion control? I mean, maybe you could get it to work, but it'd be completely different from the Pac-Man and Tetris we all know and love. And no one's gonna stand for that bullshit. And that's before getting into the whole relaxation thing. As I said, good motion control means you're actually standing up and doing those motions. That's kind of tiring, and a lot of people play games to relax and unwind. And obviously, that's not very relaxing. As such, there's always going to be a place for standard control just because of that. But that doesn't make motion control obsolete either, because trust me, if once you get into it, when you're in the mood for some motion control, you're in the mood for some motion control. Again, it opens up whole new possibilities. And you can't ignore that. But yes, it's not something you're going to be playing the same way as regular video games. So there you go. Anyone who says that motion control is the future and will replace standard controls is a fucking moron. However, anyone who shuns motion control and thinks it's just a stupid gimmick is also a fucking moron. Because you're avoiding many great new gaming possibilities. Now, that said, anyone who is not interested in picking up the Kinect or Move because they're far too expensive and don't have nearly enough good games on them to warrant a purchase is completely correct, and I can't blame them. Regardless, with all 3.5 motion controllers out, I bet you're wondering how each one stacks up. Well, judging from this video, you can probably guess what my pick is. However, each one is capable of doing something that a standard controller cannot, and in the following videos we will examine the strengths and weaknesses of each one individually. Anyway, this is Gel, and you've been GameBabbled. Stay tuned.